All right, there's two screws in here, T20. This clip rolls over the connector. You'll want to push down right there on this tab, and then this thing you'll be able to swing from the top down, and that'll release the connector and it'll just pull back. Alright, here we are outside of the car. There are 4 T10 screws in here. You got one here on the end, one in the middle, one on this end, and one up top here. Yours may or may not have a couple extras. Mine only had 4. So we'll undo those and that should open it up. Alright, once those are removed, you'll be able to just pull these off here. Your adjustments and reset pins, just little rubber plastic things. Yank those off, set them aside, and then the face should just lift off. Set that aside. Now you're left with this. So this is what you'll have left over. You can pull these off if you choose to. There's really no need to. You just pry up ever so gently on it and they do pop off. Again, there's no need to remove these, but you can do so. I'm going to leave mine on. Next step is needle removal. I know there's a lot of videos talking about using forks and prying up on them. I don't think you really need to do all that. Remember the position where all your needles are sitting at currently. They do have a resistance at the very ends. So the idea is to just grab them, pinch, twist, and lift, and they just come off. I mean, there's no need to use any kind of prying tool. I think you have more chances of damaging the face and the needle itself doing it that way. Anyway, so just pinch, twist, and lift, and they'll come right out. Just remove the whole assembly, flip it over as you're holding it together. There's these 4 pins here. That's what that looks like. Is this ordeal here. Alright, it just has 4 metal clips, 4 tabs. You just pry against it. You'll see the clips. Just pry them up, and that'll release the LCD in the front. Simple enough. Lift that metal clip up, set it aside. As far as the LCD goes, this one is, a lot of people say you need to watch the orientation of it. Don't forget it. But here's the thing. It does have orientation marks, pretty much, that'll tell you which way it goes. This side here, it's pretty flat, but on the opposite side it has this little notch at the very right end of it. It's right there, and you'll notice that easily. So this notch needs to always face right, and that way you'll never forget the orientation of the LCD when it goes back together. Once you have taken that bracket off, next order of business, pull off the screen. Be real gentle with it. It has these, I don't even know what they are. They're real soft. They can come off. So yeah, be very, very careful with them. You do not want to break them off. They are flimsy, and they are just ever so lightly glued to the screen. But you don't want to break them. You don't want to pull them off the screen. If you do, they will still work. You just need to be more careful when placing the screen back in. But they will still work regardless. So, I mean, if you feel it stuck to the screen, you'll want to just ever so gently pry the face, this plastic face, away from the board, and then see if you can get something underneath, a pick, a screwdriver, or something, just something real light to dislodge this bottom portion from the board. And I will show you where they attach once I remove the rest of this stuff. So anyway, set this aside for now. We'll come back to it. These pins are next. You'll just pull up on them and they come out. Just pull up and they come out. That's it. Set them aside. It is not necessary to remove, as this does come off without removing the face. So that leads to the next point. Remove this plastic bit and set it aside. That'll leave the board exposed. And what I was mentioning earlier, this screen, it presses up against this row here on the top, and then this row down here on the bottom. So it's pretty much a compression fit with that clip that clips into these 4 locations. It kind of compresses against it, and I'd imagine it uses a different series of electric pulses that causes the screen to release the tint on it to display whatever it's choosing to display. I have tried with a different one. As you can see, this is blue, whereas the original one is like a blackish orange, but it's actually orange from the back. It's still blue on the screen. I have tried many different ways to make it white, but it is practically impossible. It comes out to like a really bright blue screen with white lettering on it, and I don't really think that it flows very well with the rest of the cluster. So that's why I'm choosing to just go with the red LEDs instead, and the screen will be a red. I will be changing these 2 here, these 4 here, then these 4 here, these 2, they'll be changed to white. Then down here, all 10 of these will be changed from orange to red. And as well as here, these 3 here in the middle, I'll be changing them to white. And that lights up that car indicator. So for me, the first order of business is to remove this orange film that's behind here. Very easily, just grab some tweezers or anything, just get behind an edge on it and start pulling up. It is glued to the screen itself, so just be real gentle about it. Once you get it going, you should be able to hook a finger behind there and pull it the rest of the way off. That's that. If you are looking to power your gauge cluster outside of the car. It's very easy to do. Start with your constant power, then your ground. And you probably heard that thing power up. This here is your left click button. So you can click it to light up that, which would be same as lighting up your LCD to look at the mileage and everything. If you hold down on it while you connect the accessory power, getting to setting 2, that gong is pretty annoying, and there's the cluster test going. Now, cars, I believe, that are 03 and up, when they started using CAN bus, the main LEDs don't power up from this cluster test. I believe they get sent a CAN bus signal to get turned on from the light control module, and that's when they light up. Either way, but you can power them. There is a pin here that powers all the LEDs. I will get you a close-up picture of it. If you choose to, you just run separate power and just touch it on this pin here, and you will get the rest of it to light up. I can show you that. Here, I'll run some power to it. And if you touch it, there's that. It's very easy. So pretty much while you're apart like this, if you want to do something with your needles, depending on if you have an M3 or a 3 series, whether you have white needles or the M3 orange needles, I chose to take some regular 3 series needles that were white. I scraped the bottom of it off and then repainted them. I used some model paint to do it. So anyway, this is the orange that comes on the M3, and then this is the red that I have done, like that. Tried to follow the same method that BMW used to paint mine. They paint underneath, whereas I see a lot of people using the Sharpie method. They paint over the top of the needle. That's, I don't know, it didn't really look that great to me. I prefer the OEM look of it, so I chose to do it the way that BMW did it, but just put red instead of the orange. So the way to do that would be just to scrape all of this paint off. I would use like really sharp knife, utility knife, X-Acto knife, something. Scrape this off as best as you can, and get it down completely clear where you can see through the needle. Anything you leave behind will show on your final product. I did go to a junkyard and get another set of needles to practice with. I've tried different methods. I have tried brushing on. I've tried some real fine brush. It's somewhere around here on this table. I can't, there it is. Use some extra fine brush like this. Unfortunately, I don't have a steady hand, so it did not come out to my liking. There's a lot of masking that needs to be done. I'll show you a picture of how I did it. In the end, I ended up going to an airbrush and airbrushed it on. I thought that was the easiest way to do it, for me at least. The paint I used is Testor's Model Master. It's a Guards Red. This paint is discontinued, but I did find it on eBay. I did compare it to this that I was able to get at Hobby Lobby or whatever, craft store, you can. It's also test stores, enamel. It's a GI red, I believe it is. Either way, the paint comes out pretty much exactly the same. I did not see much of a difference, and truth be told, unless you hold them side by side, you're not going to see much of a difference either. So whereas that small one, that GI red, was $2, the Model Master I found on eBay was like $4 plus another $4 for shipping. So, you know, 4 times the cost.
The easiest way I found to do this is to grab some needle nose, apply light upwards pressure while heating up one side of the pad until I saw that the LED lifted up. Then flip it around, heat up the other side of the pad, and lift the LED off completely. Same thing for reapplication. I would apply heat to one side of the pad just to put the LED down, and then I would apply pressure across the top of the LED while heating up the other side of the pad just to get it to lay flat, and then flip it around one more time and reheat the other end of it a second time just to make sure that both ends of the LED are flat against the board. I would recommend getting an iron that has an adjustable temperature to it. I worked at 330 degrees Celsius while doing all this work. And I would also suggest having a wedge type tip on it. Those very fine point tips don't do a very good job at heating it up. Also get some flux, something you can put down to make sure that your solder stays on the pad. And then also a little bit of solder that you can reapply to the pads just to give them a little bit extra meat, because they use very minimal solder when they did this work initially from factory. I started out with changing out the OBC with the red LEDs first. You'll want to take very good note of where the little notches are on the LEDs, because that indicates the negative side, and you'll want to make sure to keep them aligned right when placing the new LEDs down. Then I moved over to the car symbol, the indicator for lights out and doors open. Changed that over to white. After the car symbol, I moved over to the fuel gauge. And then I did a quick cluster test just to make sure that all the work I'm doing is actually lighting up correctly. As you can see, I put all the power pins in there and powered the gauge cluster up. Then we move over to the rev counter and changed it over to white. Then the speedometer, changed it over to white. Then I moved over to the coolant temperature gauge, and then down to the oil gauge, oil temperature, or the fuel consumption gauge on the 3 Series. Then I also did my warm-up lights. The very top first light it comes to, I changed it over to red. Just personal preference there. I test the cluster a couple more times with the cluster test and lighting up the LEDs, making sure everything lights up. And that pretty much just summarizes this about 30-minute process of changing out the LEDs in a pretty quick time lapse. Spare you the pain of watching me change every individual one.
As far as reassembly goes, it's easy enough. Put this cover back on. Now I'm keeping the power on so I can show you the OBC here once I reassemble it. Now obviously you can't just put this back in here just like so without putting a diffuser in. Because this is what happens, right? You just see the LEDs through it. That's not how it works. You need some diffuser. Once you've removed that orange bit, this is what comes off of the back of that OBC when you take it off. So you obviously have to put something behind it just to diffuse those LEDs behind there. Easiest thing I found, and this was suggested also on the forums. I've seen another guy do it just in a different color, and he's used this for blue, but just sheet of printer paper. One sheet is good enough. Just lift up on the OBC ever so slightly while it's still in its place and slide this in behind it. Now what that does is it diffuses that light, and we'll put the clip back on, and once we have it secured, the OBC should light right back up with all the information that it typically shows. It also helps if you orient it the right way. That's where my mistake was. But anyway, it does actually pop together pretty easily. Just once it clips in, gets all the clips in, it'll put enough pressure on the OBC screen where it'll actually display something. And as you see, there it is in red, showing the test, because we're still in the test menu. So once I depress this button, it should light the rest of the OBC up. There we go. Fully working OBC, all in red instead of orange. Alright, here we are at the very last portion of this, just putting the needles back on. They do have a bit of a set down area where you'll kind of feel it slide and then stop. And that's where you want to stop at and go no further than that. The needles do have a sit down point where you'll feel them just kind of go to place, and then they won't go any further. You don't want to push past that point. So you'll want to set them about where they should be. And then you can give them a rotation. Make sure at the end point, at the very end point of them, is back to its stopping position. You can always rotate it the opposite direction a little bit further, and then rotate it back to get it just in the right position or where you want it at. So that one's not sitting quite at 0, so we just adjust. Now it's a little bit above 0. We just kind of fine tune it. There we go. You do kind of want to just try to set them down at their lowest point already, so you won't have to rotate as far to get to the end. That's that. Needles are set. Alright, so we're pretty much complete with the reassembly. Last couple bits are the push buttons. You'll want to put those back in. If you didn't take these things off, easy way to do it is just to take off the corner, swivel it down, and then you just push this guy in. It literally just pushes right in there. So that's it. And it's just spring loaded. Swing that back. Same on the other side. You'll just want to lift up on it a little bit to clear this needle. Swing it out of the way. Plop that guy down. There you go. Just gonna give it a final wipe down here. One thing to note is if you do a cluster test now, while the sensors are not plugged in, your temperature gauge will spike to the red and will stay up there. Nothing to concern yourself over. It just doesn't have any information about your coolant sensors. So, you know, you didn't mess anything up. As long as the gauge sweeps, it does everything correctly, you're in clear waters. One thing I'll recommend is take a picture of how your gauges are sitting when the car is off. So when you pull it out on the bench, take a picture of exactly where each gauge is facing. So every needle, you'll want to make sure to put them right back to the original spec. That way you're not going to be indicating wrong. And once you're done with that, put the face back on. There you go. And then put the screws back in the back. Those 4 T10 Torx bits screws. Put those back in. Put your rubber bits back on top of these pins. And that's it. I'm gonna clean this up and just wipe it down one more time, and we'll go to the car. I'll show you the final result. I'll do the best here to not blow the camera out because it is so dark in here. So there it is, back installed. Red needles, gray face. Everything is in working order. We'll key it on just to see what it lights up like. At least on my phone, it was kind of giving the camera some lens flare. So this actually does appear to be brighter even on this camera than it actually is to the eyes. So there's everything lit up. Everything works just fine. We can even do a cluster test. Let's see here if I can do this with my hands kind of tied up. All right. My goodness. Anyway, we are in the cluster test mode, and there it is. Red OBC, red needles, white face. Everything works as intended. It looks great in my opinion, and that's the finished product. Yeah, one last thing I should mention. You can dim this down, obviously. So you can go pretty low with it. And again, camera doesn't quite do it justice, but even at the lowest setting, everything is very visible, everything is very readable. Alright, you'll have to bear with me here for just a second. I'm going to show you the difference between the original M3 needles and the newly painted red needles. The unfortunate thing about the white LEDs is they do blow the needles out quite a bit. So as you can see them, when the lights are off, you can clearly see that the M3 needle is orange, the painted needle is red. Now when we apply power to the lights, you'll have to bear with me again here as I locate this pin. It does kind of blow them out. The orange needle starts looking almost like a yellowish bright orange, and the red needle starts looking like a brightish pinkish red. Now, the way I've gone around this to fix it is I went and now I've had these laying around for a long time, but you can also get these from a lot of different places, really. I went out and got a swatch book, pretty much, of these Roscoe Lux light diffusing films, and inside of it I used a red film that I've cut up in circles and put underneath the needles themselves on this clear film. Now I'm going to remove this orange needle here, the M needle, and I'll put the new red needle in with the swatch underneath it, or the light diffusion bit that I cut into it. And as you can see, they actually glow red now, like really red, beautifully red. And in my opinion, if you are doing this conversion to white, you really do want to do this. That's without any kind of diffusion underneath it, and that's with it. It really makes the needles look like a deep, rich red, and in my opinion, it's absolutely necessary.